University of California, Berkeley has a long and proud tradition of student activism. An important part of that activism is self-governance and student governance. Hi, I'm your host for today, Rodolfo Mendoza Denton. I'm a psychology professor here at UC Berkeley. I'm joined by my co-host, Dri Kavusi, fourth-year undergraduate and senator of the ASUC. And I'm honored to have three guests from the ASUC today. First, Pavan Upadhyayula, ASUC President and also President of Lambda Phi Epsilon. Yordanos Dejen, Senator and President-elect of the ASUC. And Rishi Ahuja, Student Advocate of the ASUC as well. Thank you to each of you for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Let's get started.
I'm so happy that my colleagues from the ASUC are here, and I know how I got involved, but I'm curious, how did y'all get involved in the ASUC? Rishi, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I remember my freshman year, I was still just came to Cal, brand new, and one of my actually old high school friends was in the student advocate's office. And the first thing he said to me when I got to the Cal campus was like, you need to join this organization. This is going to be what defines your college career. And I applied. Luckily, they thought I was relatively smart enough, and it all worked out. So then I joined the fall of my freshman year, and I never looked back. It's been kind of a defining part of my whole Cal experience.
And what is the Student Advocate's Office?
Sure. So the Student Advocate's Office is a part of the student government. It's one of the executive offices, and we basically provide direct representation to any student that has a dispute at the university. So say you had an issue with your class and you got a grade that you felt like you didn't deserve. Our office would pair you one-on-one with a caseworker that would walk you through the process of appealing that grade and looking to basically address the issue that you had. And that applies to any aspect of university life that a student might take issue with. So we try to provide direct representation to solve some of the issues that students face on a day-to-day basis.
Can I just ask you to elaborate on that? You mentioned a specific example of a grade that you feel needs to be disputed. What other examples are there?
Absolutely. So we have 4 divisions. Our financial aid division helps students that want to appeal the financial aid package they've received from the university, as well as explore financial literacy and explore different types of options for understanding their finances at Cal. We have a conduct division that helps students that get in any kind of trouble at the university or if they're accused of misconduct. And we have a grievance division that helps students that want to file any kind of complaint in regards to the university services they've received. For example, if they're looking to file a complaint against the police department, or if they have an issue with the disabled students program and they want to receive accommodations. Any kind of issue that students face, we try to empower them to seek resources or services they need in any of the kind of key areas they face. And oftentimes, sometimes it won't fall neatly in any of those categories, but we try to do our best to help them identify what's the university part of the service that they can need.
Yordanos, how did you get involved?
I got involved my sophomore year, so last year. It's a funny story. It was kind of last minute. I'm the Black community senator, and so the Black community needed a representative for this coming year. And so they were like, Yordanos, you want to run? And I was interested in politics, but I was never necessarily interested in representing students on like a campus level. And then I was convinced. I talked to Destiny, who was last year's senator, and he was telling me the pros and cons and kind of the impact that you can make with the ASUC. And I was like, whoa, it's kind of impactful, why not? And then I decided to do it, and then here I am, a year later.
So you didn't even have necessarily experience being an ASUC intern or anything like that, you just dove right in?
Yeah, I had no experience at all. I didn't necessarily know what the ASUC was, other than it gave money to student orgs, and that was about it. And then being in it, you learn that it's so much more complicated.
And I'll just mention that one of the very intentional reasons for this entire course is to give students a chance to understand what is the ASUC.
So yeah, Pavan, do you want to elaborate on how you became involved, and then what even is the ASUC?
That's a great question. So I had a history of doing ASB in high school, but I heard that Berkeley student government was something different. I heard it was very meaningful, very impactful, and kind of like its own beast in many ways. So right when I came onto campus, my goal was to join the ASUC. So I started interning in some offices. I tried to run for Senate my freshman year. I didn't end up doing that. Ran for Senate my sophomore year, came in 20th place, won by like 1 vote. And then ultimately ran for president. So it's been like a long and winding journey, and every year I've learned more about the ASUC, and there's always so much more to learn. I'm going to talk about the ASUC President very quickly, and I see it has 3 roles. One is being the chief representative of students. You're going to be in so many rooms, so many meetings, and it's your job to communicate what students actually need and what students' stories are to as many people as possible. You also are the CEO of a 501c3 nonprofit that has about a $2 million budget. A lot of it does go to student groups, but you also spend your time helping open the new ASUC Student Union, Lower Sproul, working with all 20 senators, working with all levels of administration, calling the Chancellor and all his assistants just to make sure that in all the different plans they have, the students are being taken into account. And what I've seen as the most important thing is building relationships, because there's so much happening on this campus, and it's the ASUC's responsibility to make sure that students' voices are heard when those decisions are happening. So now it comes back to, like, what does the ASUC do? And it's impossible to describe the full history. The ASUC started off owning the football team, owning the student store. I mean, it still owns the student store. And now it's kind of changed a lot more, and it has a long history of activism that I can't get into here. So what I would say is the ASUC strives to represent every student on this campus. And the way that it does is by making sure that they feel empowered to not only reach out to our elected representatives, but also to make sure that their student groups, whatever they're passionate about, is able to find a home here at Berkeley. And that's what our goal is.
Thank you, Pavan. I wonder if, as much as our time is limited, the history of activism at Berkeley is so important. I wonder if one of you might be willing to share just a little bit of that history, just to understand the full significance of what student government means specifically at Cal.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can say that for my office, the Student Advocate's Office, it actually came out of the free speech movement. So
what is the free speech movement?
Totally. The free speech movement was essentially an initiative to combat what was deemed to be unfairness over political censorship at the time by the university. Essentially, students wanted the ability to petition and explore their options in terms of political speech on campus. That was restricted, and that resulted in a huge mobilization by students in response. And it was one of the most striking examples of a mass kind of organization by students around a political issue, and really kind of speaks to the heart of what I think Cal is really about. And our organization was founded in that movement. Folks were saying that we needed some sort of voice to understand what our rights are in different university processes. And that was honestly one of the kind of turning points for our student government in terms of becoming a key portion of the kind of political nature here at Cal.
Yeah, I know from my own term, we learned a ton about the history of Cal. You know, our birthday was March 16th, or is March 16th, and we were started in the late 1800s. It's incredible, incredible. But I wanted to continue with this idea of self-governance, because the ASUC is one amazing body that represents all students. But what other pockets can students take on roles here at Cal? Are there different organizations that students can get involved in?
Yeah, the first snippet is we have over 800 student groups here on campus, and each one of these has students not only in leadership positions, but reaching out to the community, doing volunteer work, actually creating their own future here on campus. And this is something that happens extracurricularly, and it's amazing the kind of opportunities that students have here on campus.
Yeah, just to like kind of go off that, it happens. What I like about Berkeley, and I think what Berkeley is really good at, is it gives you the opportunity to do whatever you want. If it's not here right now, you can create it, and I think that's the beauty of this school. So if you're not interested necessarily in representing students on like a ASUC level, there's so many different organizations, from cultural groups to service groups to anything in between, and if it's not here, make it, and that's like everything you can do.
Yeah, and some things happen very organically too. The thing that I love the most about Berkeley is there's 36,000 students here, and everyone has their own story. And whether you're sitting at a coffee shop like Cafe Milano or Cafe Tivoli and you just have conversations with people, or staying up till 5 a.m. having a conversation about string theory, there's so much potential for students to take that leadership role over themselves. It's kind of like a form of self-determination.
And why is it important? You know, some of our students are fresh out of high school, never held leadership positions before. Why is it important to be our own self-governors, if you will?
I remember, so we just had our senior last lecture by a professor at our campus named Martha Only, and I think she framed it best. She said that each and every one of us has our own completely unique perspective that no one else can replicate. And regardless of the kind of experiences or life experiences that you have, we all have that to offer. And I think students often forget how important their voice is around the table.
So can you elaborate on that? When you say around the table, I myself have found myself in meetings with great administrators. You mentioned calling the Chancellor. I know that's a very unique ASUC position. So how is that difficult? How do you hold that stake? Aren't you a student and aren't they the administrator? Where is the balance between teacher and student and colleague? And does anyone want to elaborate?
Yeah,
on that?
I mean, I think when I first started at Berkeley, when I was a freshman, I kind of had that feeling. But over time, I was able to learn that everyone has something to bring to the table. And what I mean by that is administrators are trying to learn from students too, because their job, and administrators and faculty and staff on campus, their job is kind of centered around students. So what they're trying to do is really see how can we make the student experience best, which means students need to speak up and need to share their stories, because that's how we're going to create positive change on campus. And if there's things that are problematic on campus, which, I mean, the Campus Climate Survey has shown there's many things problematic on campus. There's a lack of resources as well, but the only way that will be changed is if people speak up and share their stories.
So you're saying that even though we have this huge university administration, like student government is still important, right? Because some people say, the ASUC, that's kind of like obsolete. We already have administrators making all those decisions. Why the ASUC then?
I think it's interesting when you go through elections, and that's always like the common thing is like, what does the ASUC really do? And it's hard to always say that we necessarily do like the tangibles. We don't always put on like events that students can come to on a regular basis, but we do have standing meetings with administrators. We're constantly pushing for policy work to make sure that on the oversight, we want to make sure students' voices are put in. So when things are happening with like the undergraduate initiative, our goal as representatives is to make sure that our stories from our communities are represented. And so a lot of times it's not necessarily the day-to-day things that students see, it's the long-lasting effects is really where our voices stay strong to make sure that that representation is continuous.
And just to jump off of that, I mean, the goal is always to see how we can end up helping students. So with like the AC Transit bus passes, or actually the Bears initiative that created that new Lower Sproul, these are just like the visible pieces of all the work that happens year after year within the ASUC. And I'll be the first one to say we do a terrible job of marketing. We are not able to share and communicate the things that we do, because so many things are happening in such deep collaborations embedded within the administration, embedded within different staff work. And that means that it's really difficult for us to take ownership over an issue, but what we can do is take ownership over our stories and make sure that we as students are always there sharing.
And I think we're at our best when we're bringing forward unique ideas on how to solve some of our university problems. Because at the end of the day, administrators, students, faculty, we're all trying to figure out how to solve big and practical problems. Look at sexual violence prevention on our campus. I think we all agree that we need to try to tackle the issue. But the question is trying to figure out what's the solution, what's the strategy, and the students have a big role to play in that, because we experience these issues in the day-to-day. We're a part of that culture.
And do you feel like when you're at these meetings advocating on behalf of students, is your input really taken into account, or are you kind of just a student that's standing in there?
Yeah, there's a quote that someone told me in the beginning of this year when I first started this job as president, and he said, I really want students to be at the table, but it often feels like students want to own the table. And that was something I took really to heart, because it taught me that, because like I kind of came in sometimes to meetings with a combative nature, where I was like, I mean, I'm a student, my perspective, like you need to listen to this. I think this is how we should move forward. And I ultimately realized that people are willing to listen, but it's a lot about how you frame the discussion. And if we can all come together and realize, why are we here? We're here to make the best educational experience for students. And that doesn't just mean curricularly, it means the entire experience has to be positive. And how can we accomplish that together? And reframing the conversation like that has gotten me a lot more positive results, where people are willing to listen. It's not all people, but I'd say a majority of people on this campus really want to make positive change.
And what do you do though if, you fill your role as a senator, you're representing a certain community, and you need to work with an administrator or faculty and they're not being as responsive? I know as a senator, I've had that issue myself. What do you do? Do you knock on their door and say, hello, listen to me? Have y'all had that experience?
Definitely. And I think that the perspective that I've kind of developed over my 4 years is that you have to put forward ideas on how to really resolve the problems. We're talking to people that really care about tackling the issues that are around us. And if they had, say, 60 students every year that knock on their door and say, I want to talk to you about this, eventually they're going to say, you know, this isn't really helping me get closer to solving the problem I care about. So I think what we forget is that we're not necessarily entitled to a spot at the table. I think we have to earn it. And we earn it by putting forward good ideas on how to tackle the problems we're facing. That's at least been my approach.
I really want to double on that, which is if you come forward with proposals, which is something that we started doing, it gets a huge response, even from people who may not be your allies to begin with. And yeah, so I really second that.
Would you agree with that sentiment?
Definitely. And I also think that sometimes not all admin are willing to listen. Sometimes they're very set in their ways, and they see things from a different perspective because most of them are faculty members, and so that perspective is also different. And so you kind of do have to keep pushing to ensure that your voice does get heard, because sometimes it could just fall on deaf ears. And so it's important to ensure that not only do you bring proposals, but if you're not being heard, you bring other students with you, so they understand that this isn't just your perspective, but rather a student's perspective.
Well, what about the fact that as ASUC senators and representatives, you're supposed to represent the entire student body? You know, there's 25, right? There's 20 senators, 5 execs, and then some commissioners here and there, and then 36,000 students. How do you even wear that hat? You know, how do you listen to everyone's stories?
It's really tough, and that was the thing I struggled with the most in this year. So I think there's 2 things that the ASUC is getting better at doing, and one is using data, and that's something that we've been really focusing on, getting survey results, looking at taking deep dives into the data, disaggregating data so that we can really see what are different populations and communities on campus feeling about certain issues. And then the second element of it is not being afraid to make decisions, even though there's so many stakeholders. Sometimes you need to make a decision that feels right to you, and I feel very privileged to have been entrusted with that opportunity. And it means that when I go into a meeting, I'm doing my best to research beforehand, but ultimately then it comes down to my decision. And it's kind of like the students have entrusted me with that, and I really do appreciate that, which means I have to do my best to make sure that at a given time I realize what's the most critical issue, and then figure out how to address it.
So I appreciate, and there's a very clear sentiment that you do a lot of listening to the student body, which you have to do as university representatives. I wonder, Yordanos, if you might be able to give us a quick snapshot of some of the issues that are most important to the students at this time at UC Berkeley.
Yeah, I think there's a wide range. Definitely the conversations that are happening a lot more around sexual assault and sexual violence, and what does that look like for students to have a safe space on campus. There's also mental health issues and wellness, and ensuring that students know their resources, which I think this is a beautiful kind of step in that direction. And also campus climate is a big issue that's been in conversations, and I think those 3 are the biggest issues that are affecting students across the board. And there's definitely smaller issues within that affect each groups differently. But I think those 3 are definitely the biggest ones. And I don't know if you all want to add to that, if there's anything else I missed.
I think the last additional one is just the fact that we're in a budget crisis, right, as a state and as an institution, and I think we're still trying to figure out how do we retain our public character given the fact that we just don't have the funds and the support from the state level. So to me, that's going to be a defining aspect of this university of the next 10, 20 years is how do we retain this public spirit?
And I'll just briefly mention how all of these issues are very interrelated. And we kind of have these buzzwords of campus climate, of mental health, and we kind of forget what that means, but it really comes down to the student experience and how they're able to come to the university. And the next generation of students, hopefully at Berkeley, is going to be first-generation college students, underrepresented minorities, people who this university needs to be a safe space, or else it's going to turn away. And that's we're at a crossroads, and we need to make decisions about how we can best support students of this campus.
So where do you start? You know, there's tons of issues that you say there's definitely overlap for different communities. You know, you get elected, you have all your platforms. Where do you start?
It's a great question.
Yeah. I would say I think you just start with talking to different students, talking to the students that are already doing the work, because most of the time these are things that are happening on smaller levels that you just have to kind of say, hey, this is something that I'm interested in working on. These are the things that I've done. What have you done? How can I help you? Because oftentimes we do a lot of kind of doing things that have already been done. And so I think that you start with first going to the people who are already doing it and taking that and helping them, expanding that, and just kind of going from there.
I love that. You know, it's such a big university. I've seen there are so many different groups, so well-intended, working so hard on different projects, and a lot of times it's the same project they're all working on. Yeah, so reaching out to groups where they're already doing work, not steamrolling over them with your own agenda. That's excellent.
I think it's also about making friends and relationships. I think Pavan touched upon that earlier. I think we forget how important it is to treat like your colleagues and your fellow students as people that you want to get to know, that you like, that you want to engage with, both in the professional sense, but also outside of that. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to forge relationships around a common purpose, which is bettering this university. And I think that starts by not looking at it just as a professional relationship, but as a holistically, how can we get to know each other, our likes, values, and beliefs, and kind of advocating together towards a common purpose.
And I think that same mindset has to be applied to our interactions with faculty, staff, and administration, because everyone is our people. And even if we come at it from a different perspective, it helps so much if you're willing to just sit down and be like, what's your story and why are you here? And once you get to understand that, you can make points of commonality or points of difference and still appreciate that difference. And if you build relationships, that's the best way to start to get to work.
And just touch upon that, we're always going to disagree on some things, right? I mean, that's the nature of tough public policy issues, is we have to disagree. And that shows inherently that we're putting the right amount of thought into it, honestly. So to me, it's good and healthy when we can disagree and come to certain compromises about how to move forward. Because I think in that kind of a healthy, productive space, we're going to come to the best solutions.
So I'd like to move on to the topic of leadership. But Yordanos, you mentioned one thing, which was a question that students often seem to ask, which is, what does the ASUC do? Let me ask you directly, what does the ASUC do?
It does a whole bunch of things. I think definitely what it does is representing students in those small closed-door conversations. It also is there with adding resources. All of the little perks that we have, like the AC Transit bus pass, like those are all things that like students have done. Lower Sproul, that's student fees. ASUC is ran by student fees. We are both a nonprofit as much as we are an advocacy group and a think tank. We combine administrators and staff and faculty and student voices and community members to come together to the table and say, these are issues that are affecting students, the greater Berkeley community. How do we address it in a way that's both feasible and tangible for students to interact with and for admin to get involved with? And I think that we do a lot of representing and a lot of collaborating to ensure that those things happen, and that sometimes it goes unseen. But I would definitely say that things do happen behind those doors. Changes are being made, and I think that representation is a really big key, and that's why like elections is such an important thing, because your vote does actually matter in ways that it doesn't matter on a national level. And so I think that it's really important. The students, if they learn anything from the ASUC, is that your voices are really heard.
And just to go off of that, there's recently, some 15 years ago, we had an administrative arm created, the ASUC Student Union, and in collaboration with them, we were able to actually accomplish a lot of new things. We were able to fund the Public Service Center. We were able to work in collaboration with the Centers for Education, Equity, and Excellence. And that means now we're very tangibly supporting different student groups. We're very tangibly supporting student organizations. We are using our money to make sure that it comes back to the students. And we also had a kind of identity crisis a couple years ago, which ultimately led to Lower Sproul and the creation, because we realized we needed to secure a source of funding, much like the university is going through right now. So we're kind of like a microcosm of a lot of the things that are happening globally, nationally, throughout the state.
It sounds like you are very busy. And that brings up the question of how to get involved and how to get involved responsibly.
Yeah, so if you are an incoming student at Cal and you want to get involved in any form of leadership, you know, first, how do you get involved if you want to be in the ASUC? And if not, maybe not the ASUC, you know, you're involved in Greek life, and I know y'all are involved in various spaces. Where do you go? Where do you begin?
I think it starts with making sure that you have a real passion for this. And that means that you can try it out first, right? Do the internship, get your foot in the door. But I realized that to really do this over a 4-year period, you have to love it. because it's going to get hard. You're going to go through difficult times. You're going to go through a lot of stress and a lot of amazing moments. Like some of my favorite moments of college have been through this institution. So for me, it comes down to really knowing if you have a passion for this, because that will drive and carry you through your 4 years here if this is really what you want to do.
And that's ASUC specific.
ASUC, but actually any club, really. I mean, I think regardless of what organization you join, it should be something you're passionate about. These 4 years go quick. Yeah. And I think we owe it to ourselves as college students to really maximize that time, and I think that means really pursuing what gets you excited.
Yeah. But how do you know if you're passionate if you've never done it?
Totally. I think you explore, you try. I think, there's no need to stay in a club, the first club you join for all 4 years here. And some of the best decisions I've made sometimes is just saying no to some opportunities and organizations that didn't feel right or didn't fit. So again, it's gonna go so fast. And I think you owe it to yourself to really explore the options and really find what makes you excited.
So just to reiterate, even though you're very clearly passionate and heavily involved, at least you did not begin with a very clear idea that this is what you would come to college and have a central identity around.
I think if you want to specifically get involved in the ASUC, the internship, there's a decal that's offered where any student who's interested in wanting to work in an office can participate in this decal, and then they're paired up with an office, whether it's an executive office or a senator office. And so from within that, they take time to actually get to know kind of the dynamics of what it means to be in the ASUC, from marketing to policy work to research to everything in between. And I think on a community level, if there's smaller orgs you want to do, shop around. You have 4 years, you have all the time in the world to kind of pop your head in and see if it's something you like. And then just do it. If you like it, go for it.
Yeah, kind of just on a more general sense, when I came to college, I was very introverted. It was very difficult for me to talk to people, which it's kind of been like a 180 from then. I know a lot of people don't believe it, but it was like a long period of time where it was very difficult to talk to people. And for me to kind of like get through that, I learned magic. But more importantly, I just really put myself in situations where I felt uncomfortable. And eventually, it became my new comfort zone. I really had to push my comfort zone. So what I would say is talk to the people around you. Whether they're on your dorm floor or you're living or you're just walking through Sproul, don't be afraid to strike up a conversation, because like almost everyone that I've struck up a conversation with I've learned something from. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be how you either meet a friend, join a club, learn about a decal, figure out an opportunity to teach elementary school kids in Oakland. There's so many opportunities here, and it does take a little bit of effort. That's one of the things I will fault Berkeley. We're not going to hand everything to you. There's not going to be a central form of resources. And as much as the ASUC tries to be a support network, it is not. That's not part of its purview. What I will say is if you look for people around you, they will support you. And that's the biggest advice I can say. You come in as a freshman or as a junior transfer or from any walk of life, when you come here, just push your comfort zone, and you will find that people will reciprocate that feeling to you.
Absolutely. So I wanted to touch on something you just mentioned. What is a decal for those of us who don't know?
That's a great question. A decal tends to be a 1 to 2 unit seminar that is offered. It's student-led, and so your teacher is going to be your peer, and they differ. They could be as simple as the ASUC decal, or it could be learning about the history of Disney and all the Walt Disney films. Decals are fun courses that students are offered that students create the syllabus, they create what the agenda is, the topics vary. They tend to be classes that sometimes are intertwined with service work. So there's a Teach in Prison decal, which is the course where you learn about speakers who are coming, and then you actually go out to prisons and you teach in them. So decals are a collective of just fun. I think your first entry point, to actually getting to learn different spaces on campus.
And it's all student-led, so more student governance.
Yeah.
I also wanted to touch upon, so some of you are saying, you get here and you start right away. I had a non-traditional entry. I ran for Senate as a junior, and I had never been involved in the ASUC. So is it too late ever to get involved?
Absolutely not. I think at any point in your Cal career, if you're saying, this is something I want to explore, we'll find a way for you to get plugged into the stuff you like. We're doing so many different things, from organizing events like in concerts, to doing this kind of policy work, to doing research. There's a spot for you, no matter what your passion is in the student government here.
So we've been focusing a lot on student government, and yet governance doesn't only include the ASUC and the more or less official organizations. What are some other ways in which students can practice these leadership skills that you have been talking about?
Yeah, so I'll just speak from my experience, and hopefully it can be broadened and generalized. I really like to say that every semester you should try something new, whether that's get more involved in one of your clubs, join another organization, and I've been fortunate enough to join a couple here. I'm part of an Asian interest fraternity, Lambda Phi Epsilon. Actually, I'm president of it, and I also started a magic decal on campus. I started a magic club on campus. I joined a pre-med organization. So there's really a pocket of students anywhere that you can find. I would say the most important thing, or one thing that we haven't touched upon in terms of self-governance, is kind of the idea of your responsibility to yourself and your health. I just want to touch back on, it may be even helpful not to join the ASUC or an organization in your first years, because you won't feel so burned out by the end of it, like I know that I know Rishi does. But going beyond that, it's really figuring out how you can take care of yourself and your needs, and then figuring out how you can take that ethic of care to the people around you. And that could be through groups, organizations, class projects, et cetera.
And thank you for mentioning that, because I think the underlying theme of a lot of these segments is, self-compassion. So I actually was going to ask, how do you lead and be a student? It sounds like you do a jillion things. Do you sleep? Like what? how does one balance it all?
I know for me personally, I don't sleep as much, but that's also because I decided to take on the ASUC as well as work. And so for me, that's also an extra responsibility. And I think that work is one of those things where if you have to do it, like I have to work, you learn the same things you could learn through the ASUC or through other forms of clubs in your work experience. So some of us aren't fortunate enough to have the leisure time to actually get involved in other organizations. And so if work is what you have to do, there's so many ways of gaining leadership opportunities in work. And I also think that there are times where I set in my calendar where it's like my time, and I do whatever it is that I need to do. So if that's taking a nap because I haven't had enough time or I haven't eaten, then that's what I'm gonna do. And I usually don't let anyone interrupt my time.
Yordanos, can I just interrupt very quickly? A lot of students do face the experience of needing to work and not having the luxury of joining many organizations. And yet there's an opportunity for growth and leadership within those work environments. What are some examples of such opportunities or work environments where that's possible?
There's so many. Definitely working on campus in anything that you do has that opportunity. I personally work with EOP, which is our Education Opportunity Program. And so I work with students as a peer academic counselor. So what that means is I merely just help them with general questions of, what does my financial aid package mean? Or what am I doing with telebears? What services are there for me just in general? What is my counselor? What college am I in? Things like that, where you just really get to help students kind of figure out where they're most comfortable on this campus, and it's providing them those resources. And I think that for what I've been able to do through there it's so much learning. Students, we just all have so much to offer one another, and I think that those leadership opportunities are available if you take advantage in them.
Right. So there are ways of finding meaningful work on campus that can contribute to the community as well as get you paid.
Definitely.
And we definitely talk about the EOP and the counseling in the financial literacy segment of this seminar. How about you?
And on top of that, I think that there's also a lot of internships and opportunities to explore outside of campus. Mm-hmm. So for example, I worked my junior year at a Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is a part of the federal government that does financial regulation. So 2 days a week, I'd go to San Francisco and work there. And that's a way to earn income, but also experience life outside of Cal and in the community, and understand what a job might look like and something that you really care about, and open my eyes to a whole area of public policy that I want to now work in looking forward. So we live in one of the most dynamic places in the country and the world. So the opportunity to go out in your next door and find opportunities is really amazing. And I can't stress enough that mental health piece. And for me, the biggest thing for kind of enabling that is to unplug sometimes. Get away from the computer, get away from your phone, leave it behind, just go for a walk, go for a hike, because we're just constantly on these things. I'm gonna sound like an old man now, like, but Facebook, like, it's good, but it gets so self-consuming. And I think we have to step back sometimes and say, give myself an hour just to be. That to me has been the biggest kind of value add in terms of my mental health.
Although, you mentioned I sound like an old man, but I think one of the themes that's consistently emerging in these seminar series is that our even youthful bodies need that kind of self-care to be able to thrive elegantly into a place where I am, for example.
I just want to mention one thing that y'all are bringing up: mental health, self-care, but we're here as students first, yes? So how do you keep your grades up and hold these positions? Like, do you allocate, like, I'm going to study for this amount of time? What do you all personally do?
I think it changes. I think different semesters I set my priorities, and sometimes in a given semester my priority is not school, and that's like a very honest realization I had sometimes. Because in high school it was always like, I gotta come to a great college, and fortunately I'm here. But now that I'm here, I've learned that my greatest desire in any given semester is to see how I can maximize my learning opportunities. And sometimes that may mean dedicating myself to research and not necessarily focusing on school. So yes, we are students first, and I think over our time here on campus, we are students first. But what that means in a given semester or in a given time means very different things for our priorities.
Yeah, definitely to just kind of go off that. School is a priority for me. Sometimes it requires me to say no. I can be honest, I've missed Senate meetings because I need to study for my midterm that's the following day, or I have a paper due the next day. And so time management is, I think, key in knowing that the syllabus is the best thing that a professor can give you, and being able to schedule your things and prioritize them. And so certain weeks, I won't open a single book. And other weeks, all I'll do is school. So I think it kind of just depends on each week and kind of the day-to-day of what you prioritize.
And I think it's helpful to find your academic passion, because it'll make going to class and going to office hours a fun exercise. When I see Pavan's eyes light up about his lab, like, I know how much he cares about the subject. And it makes being a part of being a student, I think, really a meaningful experience here.
And it's not usually my place to add to this, but I do know that one of the key things that has helped me throughout my career is simply even though there's a lot of responsibilities and things differ from week to week, I know that I always made a commitment to just show up to class, if nothing else. Yeah. That's uninterrupted time and really your responsibility, so show up to class. We've run out of time, but I really would like to thank you, but give you one last request, which is I want to ask for that one nugget of information that you would want to communicate to our viewers about this segment, student governance, self-governance. What is it that you would want to say? Let me start with you, Pavan.
Never feel like it's too late or that you're out of the fold. Really be willing and know that other people will be willing to accept if you put your best foot forward. So no matter if you've never got involved in a club or a student organization or in the ASUC, it's literally never too late, and people will always be there with open arms. Our goal is to create a community, and I know that that's true with every organization.
Yordanos?
I think I would say, remember not to take college too seriously. There's always time for growth. And so just take every opportunity to learn and to grow as a person and self-reflect, and remember to just take care of yourself, I think.
Rishi?
I think the main thing for me is that your voice matters, right? You have the only person that has a unique set of experiences and perspectives that you have. And if you don't share them, we will never hear them as a university, as a community, as the world. So you owe it to yourself and to all of us to really go out there and share that perspective, because you're the only one who has it.
Pavan Upadhyayula, Yordanos Dejen, Rishi Ahuja, thank you so much for being here today, and we thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.